Okay, thanks for joining us for the Western Wheels Conference. A couple quick things before we begin. If you need a certificate, you'll find the link for that here. You'll need to submit a separate request for each session that you attend, and you should receive your certificate in email within 24 hours of submitting the request. If there are any handouts available, you'll find those there. And if you're interested in learning more about any of the products featured in our sessions, that'll take you to the product page for each one. And if you click request pricing, that'll add it to your wish list. Here we are at the wish list. You can either complete the form and submit it right away, or you can keep browsing around and adding items to it to get one big quote. And you can always get back to your wish list right up here in the top right-hand corner. That's it. I hope you enjoy the session, and we'll see you on the other side.
Einstein once said, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish? Swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it.
Proceed.
Exhibit A. Here's a modern-day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today, and here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today, and here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now, ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A, a letter which determines product quality, hence grade A of meat. I get it. Back then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed. And now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same. And every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie-cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap.
Watch your language.
Sorry, Your Honor, but if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results will be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens, this educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant should not be acquitted. This may be one of the worst criminal offenses ever to be committed. And let's mention the way you treat your employees.
Objection. Overruled. I want to hear this.
It's a shame. I mean, teachers have the most important job on the planet, yet they're underpaid? No wonder so many students are short-changed. Let's be honest. Teachers should earn just as much as doctors, because a doctor can do heart surgery and save the life of a kid. But a great teacher can reach the heart of that kid and allow him to truly live. See, teachers are heroes that often get blamed, but they're not the problem. They work in a system without many options or rights. Curriculums are created by policymakers, most of which have never taught a day in their life. Just obsessed with standardized tests. They think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we continue down this road, the results will be lethal. I don't have much faith in school, but I do have faith in people. And if we can customize healthcare, cars, and Facebook pages, then it is our duty to do the same for education, to upgrade it, change it, do away with school spirit, because that's useless. Unless we're working to bring the spirit out of each and every student, that should be our task. No more Common Core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gift an equal chance. I know this sounds like a dream, but countries like Finland are doing impressive things. They have shorter school days, teachers make a decent wage, homework is non-existent, and they focus on collaboration instead of competition. But here's the kicker, boys and girls. Their educational system outperforms every other country in the world. Other places like Singapore are succeeding rapidly. Schools like Montessori, programs like Khan Academy, there is no single solution. But let's get moving, because while students may be 20% of our population, they are 100% of our future. So let's attend to their dreams, and there's no telling what we can achieve. This is a world in which I believe. A world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I'll rest my case.
It is our time to start breaking the mold that we've seen inside of education for so long. It's time to start breaking out of those silos and having each individual content area teaching only their content, and having students trying to learn several different ideas, several different theories all at once. It's time to start breaking that model, and here's one way to start doing it is by creating cross-curricular lesson plans. What that means is to get out of your classroom, to go down the hall, across the hall, around the corner, start partnering with the content teacher so that your students aren't trying to learn something in science and learn something totally different in automotive and something totally different inside of history. For today, we're going to be talking about the air conditioning system, in which case we could actually tie several different categories together. For the sake of baby steps and getting into this idea, we're going to stick with just science and automotive. But when you start talking about the gas laws and you start talking about Boyle and Charles and everybody that's been playing in this physics field, you could easily tie history into it and learn about the time, the era, and what was happening during these times, how these people were viewed, how they were looked upon. Same thing when you get into Isaac Newton. You could easily tie in, and if everybody's teaching the same theory, the same concept, the same ideas all at the same time, your students are going to start being able to put together these different anchor points inside their mind. These different avenues, these different areas of their brain are going to be engaged simultaneously, allowing them to take in all of the information and be able to apply this information on a regular basis. When you think about the Ebbinghaus effect, as soon as we learn something, as soon as we hear something, we gather and we move away, it starts to fade, it starts to move out. The more times you can interact with it, the more times you can touch it, the slower that Ebbinghaus effect that Ebbinghaus curve will engage. So it is our responsibility in education to start engaging these students from different avenues, from different aspects, giving them so many different anchor points that this information is going to be embedded into them. I want you guys to understand that while we're building this, while we're working together to create these cross-curricular lessons, understand that we are changing the way that education looks. The same education model that's probably failed most of us, the same education model that we all saw back in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. It is time to start changing the way it looks, start breaking down those silos. Albert Einstein once said, "Education is not learning of facts. Rather, it's the training of the mind to think." Something that is sorely missing inside of education. It's much more than just remembering and repeating stuff that you read, stuff that you saw. But it's applying that information, being able to recall that information in order to solve a mystery, to solve a problem, to solve a broken object, to figure out a solution. That is why we're here. That is what we're learning about cross-curricular, is that I can take what I learned in science and I can apply it directly in automotive. I can take what I learned in the automotive class and I can apply it inside of my history class. I can take the information and interact with it in multiple different avenues. And if everybody's teaching the same thing at the same time, these students are going to be able to see it all at the same interacting time. You're going to hear a lot from me, mainly because I like to talk a lot. I'm Anthony Williams. I'm an automotive instructor. I've taught high school and secondary levels. I work for CTI, that's the CarQuest Technical Institute, writing curriculum, building curriculum out for technicians that are currently in the field, technicians that have already gone through the 18th month and two-year programs and have started working in the field. We still fill in the gaps. We come in, we help them to continue to get their legs underneath them, and we can walk them all the way up to their master tech level. Also with me is Ken Delahoy, who's a science teacher who graciously agreed to interact with me on this project, to come alongside of me and help me to show what it looks like to build cross-curricular connections. We're going to have a back and forth and a sit down. We're going to keep it real casual because the most important thing isn't that you learn about the AC system or about the gas laws. It's the most important to see how this interaction happens, how you guys are going to work together, how to reach across the hall and ask for help, how to build the relationship that is going to carry these students on into their future. Also, we had a lot of help from Nikki Lester, CTE guru, good friend of mine. She represents Z-Space, which is an amazing product that has virtual reality and augmented reality together in a mixed reality world. It is a great way to have students interact with the components in a way that you don't have to keep buying more and more materials. You can interact with it virtually and be able to see and pull apart and remove and explode views to see things differently. This isn't the end all. I'm not saying that you can only have teaching inside of the virtual world. You do have to get down in the car eventually, but this is a great starting point. And because Z-Space doesn't only do automotive, they also do science. They also hit a lot of the other core content areas. You can buy this equipment and share it amongst your peers, making the cost of the equipment really, really low for each individual content area. Reach out to Nikki. She has a lot of information. Would love to demonstrate the Z-Space. I promise you it will not be a waste of time. It'll blow your mind. You'll feel like Tony Stark from the Marvel movies. When we're talking about cross-curricular lesson planning, it's hard to know where to start at. We know what we want to teach in autos. We know what we have to teach in autos, but sometimes we don't know exactly how that crosses over into the core content areas. So I'm telling you, reach out. These are our supporting organizations, and there's so many more that can help out. At the ASE Education Foundation, CTE, XCal, High Country, Auto Upkeep, ATEC, Console Lab, Electude, Lucas Newell. They've all taken the time already. They've put these things together. They've already gone and scoured the core content areas, and they've taken those curriculum knowledge points and they've put it inside of their automotive information. They've already made those connections and already have that information. They're wanting to share it with you. Again, Z-Space has already done this as well. If you look at their content and what they have, they've already tied lesson plans to them and already tied them to core content areas. Dactic, the guys, Jake Clayson down at Dactic and his team have taken it one step further, and they answer the question, well, how do I afford these things? Go ask them, go talk to them. They've put the time, the effort, and the research to go find the money for you. They know about the CTE money. They know about Perkins. They know about different funds that are coming from the industry. They can help you with this, and they want to help you with this. They want to share this information with you. All you have to do is call down there and talk to them. Ask them. Say, hey, I want to do this. I see this equipment. I want this equipment. How do I afford it? They will help walk you through how to get this equipment into your hands so that you can better engage your students and prepare them for what's coming in the future. If you think that this video game aspect isn't going to stick around very long, that it's just a fluke, I beg you to go and look at what Mercedes is doing, VW, Ford, GM. They're all Audi. They're all already in this virtual realm. They're already using augmented reality inside of their facilities. Mercedes is using the Halo Vision to see the car in real time and work with a single area technician. So they have technicians that are wherever in Florida or in Germany that are able to help technicians all around the world in real time and see what the technician is seeing, and also overlay components, torque specs, be able to take wiring schematics and overlay the car so they're not searching around to find where C130 is. They know it's in the cabin, but with HoloVision, they can actually pinpoint exactly where that is using that schematic overlay. So please, don't just push this stuff off and be like, oh, this is just dumb stuff. I've been teaching this for whatever, 20, 30, 40 years. The technician field is not what it used to be, and it's not what it's going to be in 5 years and 10 years from now. It is going to look so much different, and we need to be prepared, and we need to prepare our students. So please stick with me as we start breaking these molds and these ideas and start changing education, start changing the automotive industry to showcase what we truly can do. Last thing you're going to hear from me right now is that we have a hashtag movement that goes through, and I want to show how this ties together. Hashtag Stronger Together in the technician field means that technicians that are in this community are sharing information. We're going to different classes that we can afford or that we have the time to go see, and we go and we take that information, we share it freely with other technicians, and they share their information freely. We share tips and trades and tricks of the trade. We share tools and we share ideas back and forth to help actually everybody grow together. We believe in the idea that rising water raises all ships. It's not about just me and my career in my bay. It's about our industry, how people see us, how people look at us, and how we look at each other. Taking it one step further, taking that stronger together and showing that the automotive and any CTE class is not in our own silo, that we're not standing alone. We're not just the redheaded stepchild in the corner of the building, that we are part of the education process. Reach out across the hall and help them to engage their students. Science, math, history, they're all asking the same question. How do I engage them? How do I get them to want to be here, to want to learn? We have the tools, the equipment, the needs. We have what they need to engage their students, and they have the information to help build that foundation so that when the students come to us, we don't have to backpedal. We don't have to stay inside the classroom for an extra hour to pick up this information. They already had it. We know they got it from their other teacher because we planned it together. So knowing that hashtag Stronger Together means that we are stronger together.
We're here now to talk about what it looks like for two different teachers from two different content areas to work together, and what that back and forth is going to look like in the real world. So I've talked about this time and time again about how it is that we need to get out of the classroom and we need to go across the hall. We need to talk to somebody. And that's exactly what I did. And for most of you guys, it's hard. You may not have a relationship with them. I'm here to tell you that Ken and I didn't know each other. I reached out looking for somebody to help, and I asked a friend and said, "Hey, do you know any science teachers?" Right?
And I got an email, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do this."
It's that easy, guys. It's when I tell you it's simple. You just have to ask. Literally, that's all I did is I asked, and I made sure not to go find somebody I knew. I made sure not to go pull somebody that has 15 years of experience with me. Just another teacher. Okay. If we were teaching in the same school, which we are teaching in the same school, I just taught a few years back and he's teaching there now. So this could have totally happened if I was still in the classroom. This actual lesson could take place. So moving forward onto this, I'm going to share with you guys the gas laws, and we're not going to dig into what the gas laws are. We're going to talk about what this conversation looks like when I know that I need to teach air conditioning. I know what the students need to know, what I need to give the students. But sometimes I fall short in understanding the scientific principles. And so as auto teachers, when we want to teach an AC system, we teach what the components do. I may not understand the full scientific principles. So I'm asking Ken what he teaches about the gas laws and seeing how can those gas laws help to build my lesson, and how does my lesson help to support his gas laws training.
And on that, where I'm just a chemistry physics teacher, and I kind of know why things happen, but I don't know how they happen. So I learned a lot about how an AC worked. I kind of knew that it was gas laws and we're going to expand gases and compress gases to make things work, but I really didn't know. And then I start diving into this in about 2-hour period. And I was like, oh, now I have a pretty good idea. And why can't we do this? And then he's like, hey, yeah, BMW's doing that on their new cars. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm engineering now.
And it literally was 2 hours of hashing out and talking together of what I know and what he knows. We were able to start coming up with ideas to how to make things better already, which is exactly what we want our students to do. If we can get them to understand how these components all work together and understand the fundamentals underneath it, what can they create in the next decade? What can AC systems look like in 20 years from now? As an anecdotal conversation, are you familiar with an azimuth sensor?
No.
Yeah, me neither. It came across it. And so an azimuth sensor is a sensor that dictates or tells the computer at what angle the sun is in comparison.
Okay.
So there's, and I believe it's BMW. Jim Kokonis was telling me that BMW is using this because they control the climate control areas inside the car depending on what side the sun's shining on, because the sun's shining on the side that's going to be the hottest. So you need to divert more energy, more cooling towards that side. So to think about how far AC systems have already come, if we can build this knowledge into our students, imagine where it can go. So up on the screen there, I just threw up a little bit of a fun idea that I came across, just kind of a play on words with the gas law. The gas law of learning is that any amount of information, no matter how small, will fill any intellectual void, no matter how large. Somebody once questioned me and said, well, how does that work then? Does that mean they can't get any more information? I said, no, the more knowledge you get, the more compact it gets in there and the more pressure happens, and then you end up taking a nap. So moving forward, so this warm up came from the lesson plan that Ken put together. And for most of you automotive teachers that we've had these side conversations with before, the warm up time is absolutely imperative. Please, 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 because that warm up time is more than just warming up their minds. It is the change in gears. Okay, if they just came back from lunch or they just came back from English class, we need to change their mindset before they jump into our lesson and help them to stop the previous thought processes that were going from other classes and focus on what we have. So in this warm up, now, Ken, what do we have here?
I use my warm up for two things. A is for my my administrative stuff, but then I'm trying to hook them. So I kind of have different hooks that I'm trying to throw. For that one, the diver, that's what I do. I like to go scuba diving. So that's my hook. And I usually show up a couple videos, and kids just love to see a rockfish walking around. So it's just a hook that, why does this stuff matter? Because really, no kid cares about the gas laws. No,
Nobody does.
No one does. Until you try to hold your breath and you come up from depth because you ran out of air, and then you die that way. So there is reasons why we want to know the gas laws in diving. I also, if you have kids that are auto mechanics or racers or just like it, the gas laws, just looking at the gas laws, we run the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. Why do I have to have my tires so deflated as I go up in elevation? Or why does NASCAR have to have their tires so deflated after their temperature, or their cars gain so much temperature in their tires? I also like to use air conditioning systems because it's one of the most important inventions of the 20th century, because without it, we're not living in Las Vegas. We're not living in Phoenix, Arizona, because no one's going to deal with 120, 130 degree temperatures and be happy. I was just in my house without air conditioning at 95 going, this is not fun.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine at 120 what it's going to be like. So
it's funny that you actually said that. We just had this conversation right before recording today. I actually added the AC button onto this, and it's here in Colorado. Not all houses have an air conditioning unit, and so being mindful about your students and where they're coming from and whether or not they actually know what that AC unit looks like. Though if you throw an AC button, most cars have an AC button, and again, the same principle. You park your car out in the sun all day and you go get into it. That's one of the most important buttons on that vehicle. So we're going to slide up here. So the idea behind the warm up, again, just to kind of get them hooked in there. Now, Ken uses a turn and talk. Now, this feature is often shunned by, I get teachers, especially automotive teachers, their administrators tell them, hey, use a turn and talk. And they're like, they don't like this little kid stuff, blah, blah, blah. And the reason why I threw these pictures up here is this is important. Turn and talk is the one thing that every single one of us do every single day. Right now, I am turned and talking to Ken. When you're at the grocery store, when you're at the coffee shop, when you're with your buddies, when you're at the bar, turn and talk is one thing that we're all going to keep doing for the rest of our lives. And instead of looking at it as another thing your admin's asking you to do, look at it as a way to help your students do what they're naturally going to do, which is turn and talk, and give them conversation points to talk about. So when they're talking about those pictures and what they have in common, you normally walk around and listen to them, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because the biggest, as a high school teacher, what people get more afraid about turn and talks are kids are going to turn and talk about something off topic, which they will, but the more you're around, the less they will. And then you can also then see where they're thinking, redirect their thinking, Oh, I didn't even think of that. Sometimes you get those. Well, he's got a better grasp of this than I do. And that's not something to be afraid of as a teacher. That's something to embrace as a teacher. But I don't know, I don't know what's coming next, but also off the turn and talk, the share time is a very important thing, because just turning and talking, if they know they have to share out what they're turning and talking about, becomes super important. And a couple of things I will try to do is, you're not sharing what you talked about, you're sharing what your partner talked about. So forget about what you thought, what did they think? So you're learning to paraphrase, you're learning to actually listen, which maybe in this society might be a good, important thing to do. That I'm not just listening so I can say the next thing, I'm listening to actually listen.
Yeah. And a lot of teachers have fought back. They're like, it's just a waste of time, the share time. And understand these small practices. There's entire classes for public speaking, but there's times that you can fit those practices into it. And share time is one of those. Because if you ask them to share what their partner says, not only do they have to make sure they're listening to their partner, they have to be able to paraphrase it and be able to say what it is that they heard. It also can move into different conversational aspects and different things you can build off of. So don't just push these turn and talks and share times out the window. You'll see that other teachers are using them as well. And if we're all practicing the same thing, if I have share time and turn and talk inside of my classroom, Ken has it inside of his classroom, then the students, it becomes their natural expectation. They know what to expect when they go through classes. So again, don't move away from them. It helps with public speaking. It also helps them to cite their sources. And I know it sounds weird, the APA, Chicago style, but move all that to the side right now. Here's just, hey, John told me. And that's the most important thing, because sometimes you hear people that run their mouth and you can hear that they don't understand it when you ask them questions. That's the end of their understanding of that topic. And you can quickly realize that they didn't pull that from themselves, but that they're repeating something they heard. And that's an important skill to teach our students, is to know when somebody is just regurgitating information or when they're talking to a source for information. So again, share time, very, very important. Do not skip past it. So I don't have your actual film that you do, but I did pull up one. So videos like this that show the divers and they're diving down, they're swimming, they have their tanks on. What is it, something that you talk about when you're showing this video?
Well, at this point, I'm just kind of trying to grab their hook, or just trying to hook them, because it's a ship that's down there. But as we talk about, one of the things when we get to what would you do if you ran out of air? And one of the things that most kids who have never dove will say, well, and at this point you're at about 60 feet deep. Well, I can make it. And you really don't realize how far 60 feet is until you know you can't. But I'm going to hold my breath and go up. And I go, congratulations, you just killed yourself. And then some people, well, yeah, I heard of the bends. Nope, that's not why he killed himself. He didn't kill himself because of the bends. He killed himself because of Boyle's law, where if I hold my breath at 60 feet and I ascend, the pressure on my lungs decreases, so the air in my lungs increase, and I'll actually explode my lungs, and I will die. So it's not a decompression or bend sickness that you'll get. You'll actually explode your lungs. So what they teach us in dive class is, when you run out of air and if you're down, you are going to have to pull your regulator out and scream as loud and as long as you can going up. So you're releasing the air from your lungs so they don't inflate. You'll still have to deal with the bends later, but even if I'm at 30 feet where I don't have to deal with the bends, I'm still going to explode my lungs. So because of Boyle's law, that as the volume or as the pressure decreases, the volume is going to increase. If I just take an inhale of lung or gas into my lungs at 60 feet deep and I come up, it's going to expand and blow my lungs up.
My favorite thing that you just said right now, I used to get a hard time, and we had an English teacher that said, everything you teach, you always have to have some kind of, or you'll die to it. And well, you're in an auto shop, it's dangerous. There's things you can do. If you're not paying attention, you could die. And here's a science teacher that says, if you don't know, if you're not paying attention, you could die. So when people ask, how important is school? Well, if you don't know it, you could die.
And the funny thing is while I'm taking my diving classes, I'm sitting here because I know the gas laws, and I'm like, okay, this is obvious. And to everybody else that's in the class, it's not obvious. I'm not saying I'm smarter than them. I just remember Boyle's law. And then the instructor always has to backtrack to Boyle's law and what it is. And even though he said it 15 times before, until they realize that, and we practice that in a pool, only because we don't have 60 or 30-foot deep pools, we have to swim across the pool. And how far can you actually go shouting? It becomes a difficult thing. So it's just one of those things that, it is an application of the law we might not ever remember. And to be perfectly honest, I have to always look up Boyle's law, Charles' law. I know them in my brain, but I don't remember, is Boyle's P1 V1 or is it V1 over T1? I'm trying, as you're looking at those laws, I forget them, but I do know what they are and their applications of them.
Which is the difference between memorization and knowledge. Knowledge, how this stuff applies. And I tried to explain to people, because a lot of people still look at auto mechanics as a bunch of, grease monkeys or high school dropouts. And here's the thing is, we do have a really high number of high school dropouts. Doesn't mean that they don't understand the same concepts that were taught in high school. Like Ken said, sometimes I may not know the scientific principle behind it, but I do understand how gases expand, how they contract, and what happens with pressure and temperature. I know what he's teaching in physics, yet there's no way I'm passing a physics test, because you ask me which one's Charles, which one's Boyle's, I'm like, are they not the same person? So it is one of those things to just keep in mind. Awesome. So, sorry, we're going to slide in here. So we're talking about the introduction to gas laws. We're talking about on the physics side or on the science side, and it doesn't necessarily have to be physics, guys, because these things get introduced in your physical science classes in the 8th grade and 9th grade. Okay, you dig deeper into the mathematics behind them and the application when you get to a physics class, but doesn't mean you can't go down and start giving some application in the 9th and 10th grade. It's a great way to hook them. We were talking about, what can we do? Science teacher and auto teacher, we have two different backgrounds. We come from two different things. We teach what we know. And so Ken knows scuba diving and I know AC systems, but we're both going to be talking about the exact same gas law. So this is where the conversation happened with Ken and I. It took us 2 hours. This isn't something you just do on the fly. We spent 2 hours together. Now, when you guys are at school and you guys have your professional development day and all your hoorah, yay, teachers, blah, blah, blah. Hey, find some better things to do on those days, like partnering with the teacher. Go and sit in each other's classes. One of the most fun things I love doing is I love walking around the science class and I love going, hey, I use that. Hey, I use that. Hey, one of our science teachers that used to be there at Sierra High School, I forget his name now, but had a Van der Graaf machine. And I was looking at it, had no idea what it was. And I was like, what does this thing do? And as he explained to me, I was like, coils. Can I borrow this? And I had that sitting in the middle of the classroom. And as my students came in, how many of my students are like, oh, I love this. When we had this in science class and they're showing me how it works and they're explaining to me, they explained the entire lesson I had that day before I opened my mouth. And I went, cool, here's a coil. He helped us build Tesla coils. Okay. So, and we'd be able to shoot the little electric current across, and they're small little desktop models. But the students had so much fun building Tesla coils that when they were in my class, they're like, no, I know exactly what's inside of this coil. I know exactly what it looks like. I don't have to cut it apart. I know what it needs. I know where electricity is going to go because I learned this in science. And that's all I'm saying, is saying, hey, go walk around your science teacher's classroom and go, hey, what's that thing? And as they explain it to you, you're going to find there's a lot of things that we have in common, but you could do it in history. You can do it in English. So sometimes English classes are a little bit more difficult because they spend a lot more time on literature and or fictions. And inside of the automotive area, there's some things that we read are fiction. And most magazines that we read are like, no, that's not how it happens. Or anytime we watch Fast and the Furious. But we need students that can actually read through things that aren't as fantastical, and sometimes they're dry and boring. But you'll find that when you go to your English teacher, you take reading that they have to know and reading that you explain to them that if they don't understand this, they could die. And all of a sudden now it's much more imperative. And when their English teacher takes that same book and helps them read through it, understand it, and break it down, they come back to the classroom ready to work. You just cut out an hour-long section of your class that you have to help them read, and you gave it to another teacher, and you gave them an application which increases their student engagement. So talking about scuba diving, and we went straight into the thank you. Oops, too fast. So we talked about scuba diving, and then we went into the AC system and realized that we're doing with the same gas laws. So if we were going to build this together, and you have your lesson plan, you know what you want to teach, you know this is scuba diving, this is what happens, you go up too fast, you have your videos, and I'm your auto teacher in your school, and I'm like, hey, I really want to get in on this. How can we share? So my first thought is, how do I fit my AC components into your lesson? And you guys see us keep looking down. That's because we're cheating here, and we have his lessons out here on the thing.
Sorry.
You guys are seeing them up on the slides, but we keep looking down here because that's where we have our lesson plan at. So where is somewhere where you would feel a natural inclination to slide in the AC system?
Well, again, if the gas laws are a perfect place for it, it just needed me to know exactly what it is, because as far as I knew, this was about my understanding of the gas laws, which is just an air duct. I didn't know that this gets colder as the pressure releases, and I know why that is. But when I come back to, I don't know if we have video on
I
it.
will. Let's go to the live video so you can see him pointing this out.
Okay. So then as we look at this guy, the first thing we did was, as I came in, he had this running. And I'm like, okay, got a AC system in a small way. And as I start looking at this, I need to know what's going on. I really didn't know anything about this except that I have a couple radiators and tubes. And so as we started talking about it, and then he also pulled up the Carnograph or Carnot.
Yeah, Carnot, if you're like me and read it and didn't hear it.
So going through the Carnot cycle and all that, which is also physics, which is this in a nutshell, is the Carnot cycle. So, and again, I start looking at this. This isn't just one place to do it. There's so many places. We can talk about heat and energy transfer, heat flows. It's super important, as I was thinking about it through myself, that heat can only flow hot to cold. Well, that's one of our lessons in science class. And as we look at this, we're going to only flow hot to cold. So the hot air comes in, the cold air comes out. We're flowing the energy from the hot air into the cold gas in that radiator or air exchanger or heat exchanger or whatever you want to call
that
this
one's
thing.
The evaporator.
That's the evaporator, finally. And so, but all that process is that heat flow ID, and that's air conditioning. So, hey, that's what's going on. But then this is the condenser, yep, if I remember right. And so again, in this, once I know that, hey, I'm going to start off with a high pressure gas and release or get down to a high pressure liquid on this bottom side. See, I'm remembering all this. Oh, he's giving me a picture. I'm going out of memory here, but it actually is stuck. So I kind of stick with a high pressure gas and go into a high pressure liquor or a high pressure liquid. And how do I do that? I condense. How do I condense? I have to give up energy. To go from gas to liquid, I have to give up energy. So I'm going to blow air through it, a cooler air through it, and I'm going to give up, a hot air is going to get blown out here. Or is this sucking blow?
Well, it'll kick on, it'll blow up.
Okay, so it's going to blow. So as I suck air through it, I'm going to take energy from this high temperature, high pressure liquid or gas, and I'm going to turn it into a liquid. So that is my energy flow, and that is also my my just going from evaporation or condensing or solidifying, liquefying, all those heat states. So there's actually an application to that liquor, that lesson, that people are like, why do I care about this? Well, if I'm running a AC unit, I need to know that that's what's going on in this section.
That's absolutely it. And guys, hear exactly what he said is the same thing that we all say in education. Doesn't matter what department you're from, is you have to answer the question of, why do I care? Why do I need to know this? If you can't answer the why do I need to know this, then maybe you shouldn't be teaching it.
So in the idea of engaging students multiple times, Z-Space is a great opportunity for students to be able to get in and work with the AC system and work with those gas laws on multiple occasions without having to have somebody hovering over their shoulder. And in several of these programs, CDX, Electude, they have interactive models that the student can continue to observe these things. And even in like a study hall setting or after school or even at home, they can go through and they can see these things again. So looking at what they have, they can still use this inside a science class. I'm going to pause this one right in here for us here. And you'll notice that in science class, the same stuff that you're being taught, learning about the compression cycle and learning about the different enthalpy chart and how to work with it. This is stuff that technicians are learning about. Again, they used to engage with the enthalpy chart 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, and then for whatever reason started falling away, and we started just relying solely off of gauges and little safety lights, when in fact that enthalpy chart is a very major part in diagnosing AC systems. And inside of science, you're using that enthalpy chart. They're already talking about it. And so in programs like ZSpace, they've put that enthalpy chart in here so that the student can, again, engage with it inside of science class, inside of math class, inside of their automotive class, or inside of a lab or a study hall space. So remembering when you're building out your lesson plan, think about how many times can you get this information in front of a student. Every time that you build out a lesson plan, you should be thinking about, aligning your scope and sequence with other teachers so that the student can see the information multiple times in a day, multiple times in a week, multiple times over a quarter or even a 2-week period. Getting it in front of them is absolutely imperative. Um, with ZSpace, it's great because they could even take it a step further and see the system. They can actually play and have the compressor running. They can see the different cycles as they go through it. They can move around and pivot and change these items. Again, in ZSpace, they can actually do it in an augmented reality, which is out in front of you. So again, these things aren't out of your realm of reach. If you are working with your science and math department and all three of you guys can use this piece of equipment now is really inexpensive when you spread it over 3 budgets as opposed to trying to fit it into one budget. So think about these things and keep them in mind when you're building out how can I get the information in front of my students in multiple ways. The more times they get to see it, the more they're going to remember it, the more they're going to be able to pull it up when they need it.
We know that the Ebbinghaus effect, you can tell me this, I will remember the Pivnert idea, I'll remember the actual math behind it, at least for a couple of days. But if I don't touch it again for a few weeks, it's gone. It's gone. So you have to be able to engage that student in that information multiple times. I talked really briefly in the intro, I explained to you that the more times you can anchor information to a student's brain, the longer it's going to last. Now here, just in the short time, we've anchored it to scuba diving, we've anchored it to air conditioning, and we briefly talked about air pressure inside of car tires. That's 3 anchors that would otherwise maybe not be there, but if they are already there, maybe they love watching the hill climb. Maybe you have students that already noticed that at the bottom of the hill, their air pressure is low. And they're like, I wonder why they have low tire pressure before they start this. Or again, if you ever been to like a NASCAR race and realize their tires look a little bit low before they start the race, or wonder why are they swerving back and forth like they've had a little too many Coors Lights before the game, right? Here's the thing: is those are things that you may not think about inside of the AC system, inside of tire pressure, inside of scuba diving. Heat makes a big difference. Okay, inside of scuba diving, do you guys ever have a problem? Because I don't know, I don't scuba dive. Do you ever have a problem when you go from, let's say we're in Florida and it's 100 outside, and then you dive down 60 feet? I'm guessing it's not 100 anymore.
No, we run into thermoclines, which again is a lot of fluid dynamics. But if I'm at the Vandenberg, we would start off at about 92 degree in the middle of the summer for the water temperature. And by the time we got down, you could feel the thermoclines and we'd be down to about 85, 88 degrees, which would cause hypothermia in the long run because it sucks now, as long as I'm allowed to stay under, it doesn't affect me. I don't lose that much heat. But if I was doing a long dive, I would have to be in a wetsuit or a dry suit to make sure I don't die. Again, death.
Everything again.
Heat flow, hot to cold.
when we try to explain and we try to tell the students how important this stuff is, it's important. That's a real life lesson. Hey, understand, the deeper you go in the water, the colder it's going to get. understand that pressure when you're coming back up from the water, when you're coming back from underneath, you have to be exhaling. You have to, and not all of a sudden, right? Because you need some air to get back to the top. So you need to understand these things because it's very important. It could be life or death. Inside the AC system, it's not so much life or death, but it is important because it's how your car is going to function, how those creature comforts that we're used to. I mean, right now we're complaining because Colorado keeps getting hotter and hotter, but we hit triple digits here in Colorado Springs, and we're not used to that. You know, I was a desert boy, and 100 degrees was a nice cool day, but I've been here for almost a decade and a half now. I don't like 100 degrees. You know, can you imagine now your AC system's not working? Why? You take it to a shop. Your hope is that that technician understands these common principles. And again, 9 times out of 10, they understand. They may not be able to tell you the Carnot cycle. They might not be able to give you the mathematical equations, but we're going to show you how, working together, we can start building the technicians of the future to know all of those things and to be able to apply them and to be much more articulate when explaining to the customer what's actually happening. So,
and to answer the question, how do you foster this? And part of me started thinking about that is how many wasted professional development days we'd have, and teachers really just, it's a waste of a lot of our times. And I hope I'm not spilling the beans on a secret there, but this was a useful 2 hours because now I have another tool in my toolbox to be able to use. And what did it take me to do? It took me to be able to come here and learn how it works. How does this AC system work? Now, oh, heck, the THX valve. Okay, what is that? Oh, in my world, when I was before teaching, that was a pressure reducing valve, not a THX, not a thermal expansion valve, but it's the exact same idea, the exact same principle. And this is where we're going to get our cooling to happen, because as we reduce the pressure, the temperature is going to drop just naturally because of our gas laws. So, it's where does this happen? And to where, if I do have a class of kids that I know are auto mechanics, this is something that is actually useful to them. This is why I need to understand the gas laws, because I know at that, I'm not getting the pressure reduction I need, so I'm not getting the cooling that I need.
Yeah. I think about how many teachers are out there that are like you, that we're going to grab onto whatever we know and we're going to try to teach it. And you get the students that are sitting in the back, and maybe it's only 5 students that are in the back that are like, this is dumb, I don't need this. But imagine if we're able to come and help you to grab those other 5. Now, big picture, now you and I are working together, the students completely grasp this idea. Now, what does their test scores start looking like, right? Now, together, we've allowed these students to be able to showcase their knowledge and their understanding in a lot better format, and their test scores, their grades start coming up, which also goes to encourage them so that they know that they're worth more. They can do more. And anytime that you have a success, anything, the first time I cut the grass and my dad said, man, that looks great. Every single weekend I wanted to cut the grass. Now, looking back, and now that I'm a father, I'm fairly sure he was playing with some reverse psychology there. But the same thing applies for students, though. Anytime they have a success, if you can build that success, even the small little ones, they make the student want to come back. So if you get a situation where your students don't want to be in class and they don't want to learn, stop. It's not about you. Start looking back and see, when was their last success? And you figure out a way to, hey, you know what? Let me find another way to help you grasp this.
Just to throw, because you just brought, and as a teacher, if I start to realize, instead of giving a test, since you talked about a test, instead of just giving, okay, here's P1 V1 equals P2 V2, now do the math. If I can actually give a constructed response, instead of course, you're going to have your standard, do you know this? But then a constructed response where they can explain that they know it, and they might not have the perfect math, but they understand that concept, and they can apply it to something like auto mechanics, or I want to dive, I can apply it to diving, or I can apply it to why my ears pop when I go up in the elevation. All that makes all that in that constructed response, instead of just my multiple choice test, I give that one question, explain the gas laws.
Where do you come across the gas laws? And that's really where we truly find, when did they start learning? When did they stop learning? So up on the screen, you guys can see this is a product by Z-Space. And so Z-Space, there's a lot of different ways. I showed you guys I showed you guys a quick throw together demo of an AC unit here. There's some already put together modules by ATech and Console Lab. If they have some really great how-to videos and different things through Electude, Lucas Noel. This one is through ZSpace. And the reason I'm showing you ZSpace is going back to the intro when I told you guys there's different ways that you guys can afford some of these high-tech training equipment that we can have inside the classroom. ZSpace is taking these same lessons that Ken and I are talking about here, and they've actually put it together in a mixed reality. So you have it both in a virtual reality on screen, and you have it in an augmented reality, and it actually pulls out and you can actually see what's going on.
Today in school, something special has arrived. Something spectacular. Inspire a new passion for learning. Revolutionize the education experience. Empower curiosity in the classroom. Interactive, intuitive, collaborative. Introducing the new ZSpace for education. Transform the future today with ZSpace.
So one of the things to keep in mind is when you look at some of these programs and what they're able to do, I'm going to fast forward this just a smidgen here. This ZSpace can take what we're showing here all hooked up. You can't necessarily manipulate all of it, especially once it's running, because you have hot parts and extremely cold parts. But in a virtual reality setting, you can actually move, manipulate, take apart. And one of the greatest things about the ZSpace is, for like Ken, he doesn't just teach the gas laws, he may teach some sort of biology, right? Or maybe when you're talking about the lungs, ZSpace actually works for science, for history, for automotive. They have so many different aspects that instructors can share this. Going back to the stronger together, if I don't have the money for ZSpace, Ken doesn't have the money for ZSpace, but together we can afford ZSpace. Now we have another way for those students who just aren't grasping it, who need a little bit longer and who are frustrated by sitting and listening to one of us talk for an hour. We have another way to engage them. And this is, if you guys get a chance, reach out to Nikki Lester and reach out to the guys at Dactic. They can put you in contact with her. She can set up a demo. This is such an amazing piece of equipment. When you're playing with it, it feels just like you're Tony Stark. You're grabbing your computer program, you're manipulating it, you're turning it, you're taking it apart. You can dissect the human body and look at the lungs and say, okay, when you're coming up, this is what the bends is, but this is what, decompression, what'd you call it? Decompression sickness?
Well, that's bends. That would just be the lungs explode. Yeah.
The lungs exploding. Yeah. Why would they explode? Here's where the air is. Yeah. And as this pivot takes place, this is the expansion. You only have so much those lungs are going to give, and you could see that. You could show them the lungs. You could cut back and forth. So these are a lot of cool products. I'm not saying you have to buy ZSpace, but if you want to stay on the cutting edge of what's coming out in different ways to engage the next upcoming students, understand that even me as a millennial, I'm not the same as Ken. Okay, and Ken's not the same as his grandfather was either. Okay, everybody complains, they just need this, they just need no. Education needs to change. Again, we talked about it right at the beginning. We all know that it needs to change. We all know that things have to happen. But what are we doing about it? Who's making a step to make a change? This is a change. This is getting out of our silos, working together, grabbing a drink, sitting down and going, okay, what do you know? What do I know? How can we put it together to create more anchor points for our students to grasp this information? And I promise if Ken and I go down the hall and we just invite, hey, you know what? Let's talk to the history teacher and be like, when do you teach about these guys? Let's find out when in his scope and sequence, see if we can align it. Then not only are they getting the math and the science behind it, they're getting a physical application of it. And then they're getting it while they're talking about the history of Charles and Boyle. And who was the other one I call Arpeggio or something? What was the other gas? Avogadro. There you go. See, Arpeggio, Avogadro, same thing. That's why I teach autos.
I was going to Piaget.
Right? Well, then we're going into the education side. But here's the thing: is we could easily go and invite the history teacher out for a drink, show him what we're working with, and hear about what he teaches about these guys. I do the same thing when I start teaching about mechanical application and mechanical leverage. I start teaching about the crankshaft and camshaft. I go out and I ask my history teacher, I said, when do you start talking about Da Vinci? Because Leonardo da Vinci actually had the camshaft and crankshaft in the 1600s. So when we start talking about new evolution, no, that's not one of them. But it's how we apply it. How do we use it now compared to how did he use it then? And we have these conversations back and forth, and we talk about, okay, how can we build a lesson together? We once built a lesson. I was teaching alternators and starters, and the history teacher was actually teaching about the assembly line. And you would think, well, those two things don't have anything in common, but they do, because the one thing that the students want is they wanted repetition. They wanted to be able to see those components multiple times over. And at the time, I was still one of those teachers teaching them how to disassemble, reassemble, and change brushes on alternator. If you're still doing that in class, don't. It's not important. They don't need to do that. They're going to buy a new one and put it in. Okay. But to understand what's going on inside, it's still a good practice for them to see the inner workings. So what we did is we actually used an entire week. I took the alternators in, and we had each student taking apart the alternators while she was talking about, this is what the Industrial Revolution was like. This is what happened. Everybody was working on their own. Then next day we brought everybody together, and we let them share information. Hey, to put the brushes back in, I use this WD-40 straw. It helped this. And as they started helping each other, we also graphed it and shared, hey, this is how your productivity started to increase. People came from their homes, started working in factories together, sharing information, productivity increases. When we come across to the assembly line and we talk about, okay, now we were able to take everybody's skill set and we put them along an assembly line, and we took all the parts of the alternator. They've taken it apart a few times now. Now they know what part and where it goes, and they stood in their assembly line. They started putting it together, sending the case down as she's talking about what happened during the world wars. Why was the assembly line important? And they're listening to this while they're doing something, and they're physically engaged in something, and they're watching their productivity just exponentially explode when that happened. And by the end of the week, they were so excited. They were so just enthralled with the lesson. They were all A's on that test. There was a couple of B's, and that was because of reading deficiency. And that was my fault because I used words that we hadn't really broken down in class. But they were so excited that we took a class that she was frustrated because she could never engage, and now is completely engaged, and just an explosive lesson for them. The same thing here. If we work together, this is what we could create. If we work with the history department, if we work with the English department, we're sharing information together. We will truly show that we are stronger together. Anything else you'd like to say?
Nope. It was just been a pleasure to do this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for being here and for sticking out throughout this training. Again, this is just meant to help you guys to see more about what does it look like to start these conversations so that you can go out and start building these cross-curricular lesson plans with other departments. It's important, it's imperative that we start changing education. We talked about it and talk about it and talk about something has to change. This is our time to be that change that we're talking about, to put some action to it, to no longer just let it be words that just drift off into space. I'm here to help out, guys, in any way I can. Next time we do this class, hopefully it's in person and I can actually help you write out those lesson plans. In the meantime, we did put together a PDF that should be accessible to you. That PDF is the lesson plan that Ken and myself put together. You can use it. You can partner with your science teacher. You can cut it up. You can manipulate it, use pieces of it, parts of it, the whole thing. Doesn't make a difference. It is yours. Hopefully it's a tool that you can put in your toolbox to continue to engage your students. Thank you to Dactic, Jake Clayson, amazing guy. Thank you for bearing with me through all of this. Nikki Lester, you are a saint. Thank you for always coming through and always having my back. Couldn't have done this without you. Big shout out to Ken Delahoya for just being willing to jump in, not knowing anything about it, not knowing anything about me, and just saying, hey, something's got to change. I want to be part of it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Guys, have a great day. We will hopefully be starting to see you guys in person soon. You got any questions, comments, please just reach out to me and let me know. Love to hear from you guys. Take care and have a great day.
That concludes this session. Thanks a lot for watching. Now for a quick word from our sponsors.